Today's a great day. I'm Salvatore with the Cavalieri Group, and I have Mr. Salvatore Picataggio, an attorney with the law firm of Colombo and Hurd, with multiple offices in the United States. His specialty is immigration. And as you know, most people that we have as clients, they are outside the United States. They already have some properties in the United States. They want to grow their portfolio, but at the same time, they want to see what kind of opportunities there are for them so they can get the green card, the coveted green card. And Mr. Salvatore, right here, he is the gentleman. He is the knowledge, the power knowledge, so he can guide you and your family to that objective. So with all that said, Salvatore, how do you get started in the immigration law? How did that happen?
How did I get started? Well, first of all, thank you for having me. I really appreciate this opportunity to speak with you and your clients. How did I get into immigration law? I took one immigration law class at the end of my law school time. I really liked it, and it was with an adjunct professor. He's still practicing in Central Florida. Okay. After graduating, met up with him. I thought it was just going to be a chat. Immigration was not something that was really on my radar, but through talking with him and learning more about business immigration for investors, for professionals, for entrepreneurs, because I, like many people, I thought immigration was basically people claiming asylum and getting married. I thought that was it. But knowing more about the opportunities for professionals and entrepreneurs and investors, that really got my attention. And I've been doing it ever since. He ended up hiring me. I was with him for a number of years, and now I've been with Colombo and Hurd for the last year and change, where I'm happy to have a really high-level, top-notch law firm, wonderful support, wonderful procedures and processes that helps me give better service to the clients, so that they're always kept updated with what's going on, and they're really getting the highest level of service.
Excellent. And I can attest for that. Years ago, I also had to switch from being an international student, and then switch to also being able to stay here legally in the United States. And your firm responds emails quickly. Phone calls is always on top and ahead for any question. So that's the reason we have you. And today I'm pleased to have this conversation with you. So let's start like kind of in a macro level, and then we're going to start going in this funnel, and then we're going to concentrate on the professional visas, and then we're going to end up in the investment visas that are out there. So in the macro, I always get confused. How many immigration visas there are out there? I lost counting 20 or something, but you tell me.
It's about that. There are a lot of different options. I primarily work with maybe, at the end of the day, I end up working with maybe about half a dozen to a dozen different types of processes, but there really is a process for almost everything. The different categories break down into immigrants or permanent residency, green card, and non-immigrant, which is temporary. So non-immigrant, just for a sample of the common ones, your visitor, B1 or B2. So there's two right there. Your student is the F1, or an M1 for a vocational student, or a J1 for an exchange visitor. So there's three for students right there. Your L1A and L1B for your transferring of executives and managers and those with specialized knowledge who may be transferred from a foreign company to the United States. Maybe a company they work for, or maybe they're the entrepreneur and they own the company and are transferring themselves. The E1 and the E2, the investor and trader visas for people from certain countries. That is a temporary but infinitely renewable one. The O1s and P1s for advanced special abilities, H1Bs, specialized knowledge. I mean, that's just non-immigrant. That's just your temporary right there. And what was that, about 10?
I lost count already, so there's so many. Wow.
And green card is the same way. The EB categories for all your employment base, they go from 1 to 5. Extraordinary abilities, professors and researchers, national interest waivers. Boy, we're going to want to talk about that one. That's one of the most popular ones I do. Getting jobs with U.S. companies, it's called the PERM or labor cert. That is when the U.S. company sponsors a foreign worker. Then there's EB4, which you don't see much, so we'll just kind of gloss by that. But EB5 is the big one, the immigrant investor, the $900,000 investment for a green card.
Yeah, we're gonna talk about that very briefly too, very soon. I'm sorry. EB5s, those are awesome. Okay, excellent, Salvatore. Tell me something. Let's go now. Some of our clients are highly skilled in whatever they do in their countries, and most of them are from Latin America, Argentina, Peru, Panama, and those countries out there, Colombia, but mostly are from Argentina. Interesting. Okay, so they're highly skilled. Talking about that, what kind of visas they are and what is required for them to maybe start thinking right now, well, maybe in a year from now, I need to make that step. What do I need to do today?
Right, yeah.
That we're starting this new year, 2021.
Yes. For green cards, if you have some type of advanced ability, you're highly skilled, the two I primarily recommend end up being the EB1A for extraordinary ability or the EB2 national interest waiver. And the way I think about these are the EB1A is more about recognition. It's about the past. You have a illustrious career with a lot of recognition for achievement. It's not necessarily about your credentials, even though it is. It's about the recognition for achievement. The EB2 national interest waiver is more about a mix of the past and the future. Yes, you need to have achievement and education and ability, but in that process, they're very concerned about what you plan on doing in the United States. So EB1A, extraordinary ability, I'll talk about that one first, because I mentioned it first, is a green card process. It is a self-petition. You do not need to have a US company or person request for the person to be here. They're controlling their own destiny.
Non-sponsor. This is the non-sponsor.
No sponsor there. It's a self-petition, which is fun because then the person ends up being both the petitioner, the person requesting the benefit, and the person receiving the benefit. They get named as both the petitioner and the beneficiary, which is fun to see the name printed twice on the receipt notices. So for this one, this is all about recognition, and immigration is looking for evidence in at least 3 of a maximum of 10 different categories of evidence. This is just documents, letters, articles that they will find about them and their work that I will then present. So some of these categories are awards. They could be major, they could be less major, but still at national or international level, awarding the person for achievement, or maybe awarding a project they worked on that they were really essential in participating in. Media coverage about the person and about their work, not just about the work in general, but what that person did on it. Media that they have produced themselves. Maybe they've written articles, maybe they've written scholarly articles that was printed in a journal, a scholarly journal, like a legal journal, a business journal. So they're producing content, research. A leading and critical role. That's a really good category. I like that one a lot. So someone is at a high level, they're really contributing to an operation of an organization, company, foundation that has its own good reputation. So now you can see how you can get evidence of evidence at that point. So not only do we have to prove that this person is contributing, but that the organization they're contributing to is itself important. The display of their work in artistic exhibitions and showcases, if that's one thing that, if they're in the arts field. There's also categories for box office receipts, if they're in the arts field, things like that, sales, album sales, if they're musicians. Then there's also the original contribution. Are they making a difference in their field of practice? So say I'm talking with an engineer. An engineer may have a laundry list, 10, 15 years of high quality projects that they've developed. And yeah, they all came in on time and under budget. But how is that contributing to the field of engineering? Have they developed a technique? Have they somehow given presentations or written a lot of articles? Again, there's some overlap in the evidence. How they're able to actually contribute. And then also another one, have they made a lot of money? Have they made a lot of money in their field compared to the rest of the field, which is a challenging one to argue if that is kind of hard to come by, but it's a fun one to argue if we can do it. That one's really good if you're someone in professional sports or music or arts, because a lot of those numbers are really available. And then we're arguing that when you argue this evidence together as a whole, it's rising to the level of among the best in the world.
Of course.
The phrase used to be kind of like top 1%, even though, you know, we're lawyers, we could argue how what that really means. But we're trying to get the best of the best of the best. Sometimes this is known as the genius visa or the Einstein visa. But really, I've done it for people in business, in arts, in sports. Really, it's a pretty broad spectrum of folks who could apply for this. And yeah, the result is a green card. This is a permanent residency process that your clients will be leading themselves. They're applying on their own behalf. They're not looking for a US company to do this for them. Having support from people in the United States showing that, hey, we're interested in your work, we really think you're great, that's going to be really good to have, but they don't need a US company to sign on the form or anything.
I see. And this type of visa, the EB1, right? The EB1, how long does it take from beginning to end to get the final green card in the
Sure.
in the end?
So if you're applying from abroad, step one is you have to submit all this evidence to the U.S. Immigration Service here, USCIS, U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Service. Now, what's great about that form is that it is eligible for something called premium processing, where, of course, you have to pay for this process. You give the government an extra check for $2,500. They will give you an answer on your case in 15 days, 1-5. If you don't, it's going to take several months, probably even closer to a year. But to pay $2,500 to get an answer in 15 calendar days, not even business days, calendar days, that's a pretty attractive thing for people, which is why a lot of folks gravitate to the EB1A, because that answer is right there. Then they have to go through the consulate or embassy to get their permanent residency through them. That's going to take several months, especially now as consulates and embassies abroad are in a modified state of reopening. Some of them closed down again. I have some clients who are in Germany, who all the embassies and consulates there, they shut back down at the end of December. They had been open, but now they're closed again. They're only doing emergency appointments. So we have to keep an eye on that. But pandemics notwithstanding, you're still looking at probably after approval of step one, maybe another 6 to 10 months, give or take. It could be longer, it could be shorter, to actually get the permanent residency through the embassy, and then you're entering the U.S. as a lawful permanent resident, getting your green card.
Okay, so it's pretty fast with the payment of the.
As far as immigration goes, that's a pretty fast one.
Yeah, because I always heard that immigration takes forever, for years to do anything, but clearly it's not the case. And it's nice to have this option, the $2,500 option, to speed up things through. Now, I think you mentioned, but it's not still clear, at least to me. Does the filing for the EB1 has to be done in the United States, or it has to be done outside the country, outside the United States?
We start with submitting paperwork to USCIS, which is why using a U.S. immigration attorney is essential. We're going to gather all the documents, working with the clients to get the best evidence that they can provide us for these various categories. We're assembling it, we're organizing it. It all goes into the legal argument that I'm preparing, that I then submit to USCIS here in the States. Once they approve it, they pass it over to the appropriate embassy or consulate to finish it up. Now, if they're here, you don't have to leave. If they're here in the United States, this is true for almost any green card process. If they're here in the United States and they're here lawfully and they have lawful status, maybe they're a visitor or a student, they can apply for their green card while they're here. They don't need to leave. So for the clients who are abroad, they stay abroad until we finish with the embassy or consulate who brings them in for an interview. If they're here, they stay here, and they can apply for that first step, the EB1A. And if they want, they can even do the green card step at the same time. It goes in the same box.
Okay,
so they have options as well.
So they have this flexibility, either in country or being here. Now, in terms of most of the applicants, they have their family. Is the family also admitted as a temporary status?
Right.
To work?
So if the family sticks with the primary applicant, the spouse, and any children who are under 21 years of age when we file. Okay. So adult children, sorry, you're going to have to get your own thing. But if the children are under 21, they tag along with your mom or dad, whoever is applying. Okay. So they would all go together. So say it's a family of 4, husband, wife, 2 children. They're in the United States. Maybe they're finishing up a student visa.
Correct.
And they apply for this EB-1A. They apply for the green cards as well. The primary applicant, the spouse, and the 2 children will all submit green card applications along with either mom or dad, whoever's leading the charge here. And they all go through the process together. Now, the merits of the extraordinary ability is just going to be on that one person. The other family members, they're just concerned about, did they enter lawfully? Did they ever violate their status? Did they ever stay too long? Did they get arrested or anything? They're just more worried about the individual for the family members, whereas the qualifications of the main applicant are going to be reviewed separately by immigration.
Excellent. That amazing information. So useful. Okay. So in terms of this visa, then so automatically, so once the process completed, you get a green card, I guess, right?
Right. This, if you're, yeah, you would end up with a green card, permanent residency.
Okay. Excellent. Now, so if you don't mind, let's switch to the EB2. Apparently, this one you need a sponsor. This is the one that I hear the most, but I don't know.
Okay. So EB2 is another category of green card applicants. So the EB1, the one I'm talking about is actually EB1A for extraordinary ability. There's also EB1B for professors and researchers. Mm-hmm. There's also EB1C for multinational executives, having a company abroad, having a company here, and you're being transferred. EB2 also has some subcategories. The classic or standard EB2 is having the sponsor. Having the sponsor, they have to test the market. They need to get a wage determined by the Department of Labor. They need to advertise for a job position. They need to do actual full recruitment efforts and interviews if anyone responds. Then they need to get it certified by the Department of Labor. Then, after all that's done, which can take up to a year sometimes, then they start applying for things with Immigration Service. So this is all Department of Labor stuff first. And yes, a US sponsor is required. But the EB2, same parents category, but there's also the national interest waiver, which is actually a really good name for it. Because basically they're waiving away all of that stuff. The market test, the sponsor, you're waiving it away because the person who's coming is going to serve the national interests of the United States. It turns it into a self-petition, just like the EB-1A.
Oh, wow. Is this a temporary, this waiver is temporary or something that...
this is a green card. It's another green card process. You're just saying, I'm so important. I'm going to change the United States for the better in my field. So therefore, I don't need to get a job offer in the United States. I don't need to test the market. It's so important that I would be here that you should just give me the green card as a matter of discretion. You need some basic requirements though. There's an education requirement for this one. There's no education requirement for the EB-1A. There is an education requirement for the national interest waiver. A master's degree, a bachelor's degree plus 5 years of experience after that bachelor's degree is earned. Or we can argue something called exceptional ability, which, like the extraordinary ability I just talked about, there's a few different categories of evidence and you need to argue 3 of them. I would say 99.9% of the cases I do, I'm using education only. It just makes it easier for the immigration officer to understand what's going on. It makes it more of a binary yes or no argument as opposed to the more discretionary opportunity for them to put their own spin on things, which I prefer them not doing. I'd rather give them all the information they need. So these are for your clients who have master's degrees or bachelor's degrees plus experience. These degrees do not need to be American degrees. They could be foreign degrees. And all we do is we create a equivalency test. We use a service that will match their foreign degree and classes to an appropriate United States degree.
Yeah. So with all that said, 2 questions come to mind. Number one, paperwork, all this documentation has to be translated into English, I assume, if you're
for every immigration process, anything in Spanish, Portuguese, Italian, whatever, we need to submit the original and an English language translation. You have to do both.
And the translation is done by your law firm or is done
it depends.
By someone certified?
USCIS wants a certified translation, but that doesn't necessarily mean it has to be a professional commercial translation. You don't have to go and use a translation service. as long as the person translating it is including a letter of certification with the translation saying, I'm certifying, and they get it notarized, I'm certifying that I speak both of these languages, and this translation is true and accurate. It doesn't need to be a professional service, though, of course, you're free to do that. It can be someone else performing it as well. And sometimes we will step in and do some translations ourselves if necessary. But typically, our clients do end up using a service just so that everything goes at once and then everything comes back all certified and clean. So after the education for the national interest waiver, we need to prove this person's actually going to serve the national interests. And this is a 3-part test created by a case called the Matter of Danazar, not dinosaur. The first time I read it, I thought it said dinosaur. It's not about dinosaurs. Danazar. The 3-part test. Danazar. D-H, Dan, it's a D-H word. Danazar. And this is showing, number one, this person has an endeavor or a project or an impact that they're going to make that is going to have substantial merit and national importance. Number two, that this person is well positioned to make this impact. And number three, that when you look at all the factors and evidence together, it would make sense to waive that job offer requirement. So as many things in law goes, there's a 3-part test. There's always 3-part tests, and this is no exception.
Okay, excellent. Now, a lot of the investors we have also come, they have their families, their grandparents and their fathers, they came from Europe. Having a European passport or in other countries, does it change the filing? Does it help the applicant? How does it work? I always heard that, but I want to hear from you, the attorney, the expert on this matter, if this is really true.
So for green card applications, it's your country of origin. It's where you were born. So for a green card, you can have 5 different passports, but at the end of the day, the one from your country of birth is the one they're going to consider for green card availability. So there's a fun fact about immigration. Green cards are a finite resource. There's only a certain amount of available per year, per category, per country. Now, most of South and Central America is okay with this. There's a few South and Central American countries who may have a little bit of a delay. And this is where the person's family may indeed help, because there's this concept called cross-chargeability. Big long word, but it just basically means if the applicant's spouse, so if the applicant's spouse is from a country that isn't subject to some type of green card delay, they could use the spouse's national origin. So Mexico, for example, has a long wait for a lot of immigration categories.
Okay.
That's one of the common ones with a long delay.
Mm-hmm.
So if an applicant who is Mexico and is looking at one of these long delays, say their spouse is from another country who has no delays on green cards, they can use the spouse's national origin to basically get things moving and they don't have to wait. So that is one of the ways having a different passport help. Another way is if they're going to start with a temporary visa first, particularly the E2. I know this is for investors. I know we're going to talk about that in a moment. Yeah. But the E2 is for nationals of certain countries. But if you have an alternative passport, you can use that too. I typically end up doing this with a lot of Brazilians. Brazil is not on the list. Italy is on the list. And a lot of Brazilians hold an Italian passport. So yes, they are Brazilians. They're doing the entire process through the US Embassy in Sao Paulo or Rio, but they're doing it with their Italian passport because Italy is on the list for an E2 visa, but Brazil is not. So for green cards, though, it's where you're born. For something like an E2, which is typically a faster way to get in the United States, that can get the person to work quickly, they can use that alternate passport to enter in the United States, and then they could apply to a different process to turn it to a green card later on.
Okay, that's excellent. For example, I have a lot of investors from Argentina. How is Argentina in this process? And then
Argentina is on the list. I'm just going to double check, but yeah. So if Argentinians are on the list, and let's see, one moment. Yeah, Argentina is on the list, so they can just apply directly. So an Argentinian can do an E2 directly. And Argentina is typically not one of those countries that faces a delay in green cards.
Okay.
So they would just apply directly. But From time to time, you may see some type of delays from certain countries. Some get added, some get removed. Immigration law, especially over the last 4 years, has been pretty volatile in terms of what requirements and policies are.
Yes.
We're expecting a little bit more volatility over the next year or so as things either return to a state of normalcy, as certain policies get revoked and eliminated, and certain new policies get added. So we're going to expect a little bit more on some changes in policy coming up soon. But in terms of their passport, someone like an Argentinian, they're pretty much free to do whatever process they want in terms of where they're from.
Yeah, and in the case of Peru, how's Peru doing?
Peru. Peru. Yes. I believe that is Peru. I believe is on the list as well. Most of the Central American countries are, and South American countries. Yeah, Brazil is like the odd one out.
Correct. And here in Orlando, today.
I stand corrected. Unfortunately, Peru is not. So a Peruvian investor is a great example. So if a Peruvian, they're born in Peru, they have a Peruvian passport, they can't do something like an E2 visa. If they have another passport, they can do an E2 visa. But if they're going for a green card, it won't matter. Peru typically is not part of any type of green card delays.
Wow, excellent. That was a golden nugget right there for the Peruvian folks that we have the pleasure to serve. And going back to Brazil, we're in Orlando, and my office has 2 offices. We're in Palm Beach and here, so we see the cross spectrum of nationalities. And in Central Florida, there are a lot of Brazilians that are coming to live permanently, invest, etc., etc. So with all that said, so let's switch now to the famous world renowned investor visa. As far as I know, it's called EB5, counselor.
EB5 is the famous one. That's correct. Or how to buy a green card.
And
it's not
now,
that.
Okay, so I'm gonna ask so many questions on this one that we're gonna make it fun. Okay, so here I am in Latin America. This is almost a real case,
Right. We won't disclose anything, but this is a hypothetical.
The suspects have not been named. Okay,
the names have been changed to protect the innocent.
Yes. So Latin America, they're builders, well-known builders, and that they have never invested in the United States. They want to come here, and at the same time, they want to get the green card. So the dilemma for them is the following: coming and investing. It is either someone from the family, from the construction family, comes here and manages the property, the holdings, the construction, or they hire someone from here. So how would this work?
So for someone looking to make an investment in the United States, the one option that I've been teasing earlier is the E2. That's the temporary option. That's something where, when consulates are open normally, is a pretty darn quick way to obtain permission to come to the United States to live and work. So they'd be setting up a new company in the United States, and they'd be making an investment of personal funds. So whoever the investor or investors are making personal investments into this enterprise that will be used to develop this business and create employment opportunities for U.S. persons. There's no number associated with the E2. It's just there needs to be a plan to hire people. Of course, we give them a hiring plan. We try to anticipate a good number of employees. So they are going to be coming over here to develop this business enterprise, to use this investment to start operating this business. Or the green card option of this is the EB5, where they're making a specific amount of investment. The E2 does not have a specific amount, but EB5 does, and it's $900,000 at the minimum. And the other level of investment is $1.8 million. And the reason there's 2 is because the program is encouraging investments into areas of high unemployment. They want to use these projects to create jobs. So to make an incentive to put these projects in the areas that need it most, they reduce the fee. So if we have to do a study, we look at the geographic area, we get statistics, we use economists or other professionals to assist us with that to determine if an area is one of these targeted employment areas or not. And that determines how much they will invest. So they can develop this straight away. They don't have to do an E2 first if they're willing to hang out at home for a little while, because as box checking as EB5 can be, do you have the money? Are you investing it? Are you creating 10 jobs? Is this project real? That's at the very most basic level what we're trying to accomplish. What we're trading off for this relative simplicity and this kind of regularity is, one, money. It's $900,000. That's a lot for a lot of people, but we're trading off money, but we're also trading off some time. Right now, EB5 has gotten very slow. Even though the fees went up about a year ago, it hasn't really changed the overall processing time, which is hovering anywhere from 2 to 4 years. That's one of those things where, yes, right now it's long. It had been much shorter in years past, but over time it has creeped up and up and up because the program has been very popular and there's just so much work to do. I'm hoping that we see some of that be brought down. I'm hoping that something like premium processing gets expanded to include EB5 sometime in the future. It probably won't be that 15 days. It'll probably be more like 45 or 90, but shoot, I'll take 90 days over 3 years any day. So they're proving that they're making this personal investment. We're going to determine that the money came from lawful sources. We're going to show that this project is real and viable and essentially shovel ready, if not already operational. So your example where they may have someone in the United States getting things going, they can still make that investment. They can have someone in the United States start operations, a United States partner or employee, and then they're going through the process of an EB5 by showing, look, I've invested this money and look, things are already happening. The money's already being used. The land was acquired. We're doing site work. We're maybe even going vertical. They're able to show that things are actually happening according to their business plan and their hiring plan. They can do this on their own, and they can count all the jobs that are developed directly by the business. Or they can affiliate with another entity with a license called a regional center, which is just a license that a private company or sometimes a public entity, there are several cities and even whole states that have regional center licenses, and that allows for something like indirect employment creation. So these jobs need to be permanent. And sometimes with a construction project, well, by nature, construction jobs aren't permanent. Yeah. But when you're using a regional center, a large construction project will have a lot of indirect employment creation as a result of this assisted living facility or hotel or soccer stadium, like Orlando City Soccer Stadium, for example, that could be created. So using a regional center license, either one that the developer client affiliates with, someone that's already existing. Some folks out there are selling their licenses because they're not using them anymore. Maybe they used it only to develop one thing. They don't need it anymore. They can sell it. Or they can just affiliate with one that's already existing. They can use that to their advantage to create indirect employment creation. They can also do some more unique things with the path of the funds. It doesn't have to go directly into the enterprise. They can stop it in a special purpose entity, or they can do it as a loan as opposed to an equity investment. Their options are more varied when they're affiliated with a EB5 regional center license, which I guess the short version of everything I'm saying is that there are options. There are options for all these investors to talk with an immigration attorney like myself and like our firm to figure out what is the best opportunity for them. Because again, they could start right with EB5, they could affiliate with the regional center, maybe they do an E2 first because they really want to get here quickly, and then change it to an EB5 later. And our job is to find the thing that works best to marry together their business and immigration goals. Because a lot of times in the world of immigration, those two things do not see eye to eye.
There's a match there, and you are the matchmaker. That's what you do. You match the needs of people looking to immigrate and invest, and also, well, here's the government. Well, how do we do this? Now, so in terms of the investment, let's pick for this example $900,000. And let's say nothing has been selected. They are in the trade of real estate, and they're thinking about buying probably an hotel and renew it, or just put it back to work, or building, whatever of the two. The $900,000, do they have to be in the United States at a specific moment, or can be done in a installment basis based on what the government immigration law requires?
That's a really good question. So typically, the money is invested. The regulations say the money has to be invested or in the process of investing. And in some circumstances, you do see a kind of phased out investment over time. Typically, though, what happens with the vast majority of EB-5 investments that I've worked with is the money's here. That entire sum is invested. Now, it doesn't necessarily need to be in the project yet. Escrow is allowed, so the money can be invested into the escrow account, and there can be varying conditions for the money to be released from that escrow account. So there are those options for investors as well. So if they're concerned about all the money being in the accounts of the developing thing, and then what happens, they have to get it back, you can put it in escrow and have various release triggers. Escrow will count as the money being invested for the purposes of EB-5. Oddly enough, not so much for E2, unless you're buying something existing. Just a weird quirk of the regulations, but EB-5, money in escrow is considered invested with various release triggers that can be used. Most of the time, it's just held there until the case is filed and the file is confirmed to be in process with immigration. Then all the money gets released. Because at the end of the day, investors can't necessarily wait, and developers can't necessarily wait for 2 to 4 years for this thing to be approved to start using the money. So essentially, the money starts getting used, and the jobs start being created well before the case gets a final answer.
Now, escrow, when you mention escrow, we're talking about escrow in an immigration law firm, or the escrow of a title company. What escrow is this one?
So typically the immigration firm doesn't hold the entire investment in escrow. Usually it would be a separate company, either another attorney, a title company. There are specialized, or in a bank, there are banks that are more comfortable with doing EB-5 investments. They'll do it, and they'll make a trust account. There are EB-5 escrow type companies. With EB-5, there's basically a little service provider that has developed to specialize in something. So there are EB-5 business plan writers. They write business plans only for immigration processes. There are immigration financial companies that basically only work with big time investments like this. I mean, they work with other things too, but they specialize in doing EB-5. And having an experienced EB-5 team led by your EB-5 attorney, like myself and our firm, what we like to do is we have team members that we use over the years that we're comfortable with, that we trust, so that the investor has this rock star team of people to help them out.
Yeah, this step reminded me the process also of a 1031 exchange, where you have to use a licensed intermediary in order to make this happen. So it brought memories of that. Now, you alluded to this briefly, but this very important point, okay, which is the employment. It is 10 people for what I understood.
10 for EB-5. And that has been new jobs, new created positions. So if someone's buying a hotel or an assisted living facility, and I use those as 2 examples because they're still super, super popular. Number one is it's hotels. Multifamily is another big one. Assisted living facility is another big one. If it's already operating and existing, you can't just say, well, I'm investing $900,000. There was already 10 employees. There you go. Unfortunately, you have to create 10 positions via the investment. So you need to go over and above. So that might require a significant redevelopment or repurposing. Essentially, you can't just slap a new coat of paint and change the carpets and flip the sign around and say, oh, it's a new project. It has to be and I'm going to use the term that they use, a new commercial enterprise. There needs to be a new development of some kind going on that will create 10 jobs, not just save jobs. There is an exception for someone grabbing a business that is struggling. There's a definition of a type of business that is struggling where you can use retained jobs. But most folks that I work with are starting something from scratch, from dirt, or they're buying something that's already existing and would need to do some type of significant addition or redevelopment of it.
Okay. All right, excellent. Very good clarification on that. Now, so in the trade of construction, there is a lot of 1099s because they do temporary jobs for, let's say, improving the property. So these ones do not qualify for the EB5.
This is why construction projects are typically affiliated with an EB5 regional center, one with the license, because those are then all indirect jobs. The way they calculate the indirect employment is through economic models, or like I like to half jokingly call it, fancy math. Not much of a math person. I'm a law person. Math, it's been a long time. So me and math have like a distance relationship. So we use an economist, and they use these different economic models that are approved by immigration. They have names like IMPLAN and RIMS2 and REDINE. They have these fancy names. And they're basically input-output models where the investment going in and the total investment going in is in certain categories. Those categories have different multipliers. They're run through a formula, and then the number of jobs come out the other end. That's how they determine the job creation. And then the job of the project and the investor, as time goes on, is to make sure that that money is spent in those categories. So there's all the hard construction costs, the soft construction costs, operations costs. As long as the money is being used roughly close to how they say it's going to be used, the economic model will result in a estimated employment creation, not necessarily just at the development itself, but in the area, in the city, in the town, in the county, in the region.
Yeah, excellent. So these regional centers allowed companies in the construction business to be more nimble and adapt themselves to a specific project that may have a beginning and end date because they're specific.
Because it's construction. So there'll be a lot of construction jobs will be considered indirect. And then eventually the operations will kick in, and there'll be some operation jobs. Some of those will be direct because a hotel, for example, is going to need quite a bit of full-time staff. But then at that point, the construction usually takes care of it as indirect employment later on.
Now, the jobs created, the new jobs created, do they need to be at a minimum salary or a minimum threshold or?
Full-time. They need to be full-time positions, which immigration defines as at least 35 hours a week. They do not need to be managerial, supervisory, skilled, unskilled. It could be whatever. Again, I like to half jokingly say that you could hire 100 janitors if you wanted to, if you needed that many. It doesn't matter what type of employees they have. Number one, with indirect employment creation, it's all based on expenditures anyway.
Yeah.
But say they were doing this on their own, free from a regional center model, and they were building something that's going to have its own staff, enough staff. It really doesn't matter the level that they are at, as long as they can claim them as employees later on.
Yeah. Excellent. Now, the original example was, so let's say this company is originally from another country, let's say Argentina or Peru. Now they're investing in the United States. They want to send a person here that they trust over here to the United States. Does that position count as one of the 10?
So who is the investor in this situation? The person being sent over?
Correct. Yes. Yeah.
So the investor never counts as an employee.
Okay.
The investor doesn't count as their own employee. So if the company's thriving at home and they're going to start an operation here and they're going to do it through the EB5, it's all about the U.S. citizen and permanent resident employees that they create. So say they bring themselves, they bring over another one of their managers. Yeah, that's 2 people, but that doesn't mean they only have 8 left. They still have 10 because it needs to be citizens or permanent residents that are being hired for the EB5 purposes.
Okay, excellent. So clear. So it has to be U.S. resident job creators. Okay, jobs being created. Okay, excellent. Completely understand. And the process takes between 2 to 4 years, the whole process.
First step 1. So remember how I said earlier that for EB1As and EB2s, if you're here in the United States, you can do your green card at the same time. Well, EB5 is the exception. You got to wait for step 1 to be approved before starting on step 2. So if they're here, they can't file a green card until the investment is approved. Then they can file for a green card, which means if they're here as a visitor, it's not going to be enough time. If they're here as a student, that might not even be enough time. So someone doing an EB5 it'll be best to prepare to go through the embassy or consulate. because it's just going to be such a long timeline to be planning for being here. Now, if there's something on, if they're on like a long-term status like an E2, which can be renewed, or an H1B, which is a maximum of 6 years, if they're here for something like that, well, then maybe they could work it out. But even then, it's often better to plan for a consulate trip. If they happen to be lucky enough that they're here in the United States when this first step is approved and they're eligible to adjust their status to green card, well, then great. That's awesome. And we're very fortunate. But for the most part, we should probably plan for a process abroad.
Now, so I have 3 more questions, and I want to be super, super thankful for the time that you're dedicating to this interview. And by the way, you have a lot of passion, so I can see that you really love what you do, because the level of detail that you explain is insightful. Now, so a project, a real estate project, maybe you finish it in 2 years. So what happened when that is done? So you need to have the next one over, I guess.
Well, the money doesn't necessarily need to be put into another project, though it can. And recently, immigration has developed policies to allow that. We call it redeployment, even though immigration doesn't call it that. That's what everyone calls it, redeployment, where you can put it in another similar project. But really, the base requirement is that once the money is invested, you need to sustain the investment through the entire life cycle of the immigration process. And this is a good time to explain what really the steps are here once there's an approval. The green card that someone gets is a conditional green card at first. It is a 2-year green card. At the end of those 2 years, they have to submit another application to immigration to confirm that the money was invested and that the jobs were created. So step 1 is, here's what I will do. And then at the end of 2 years, here's what I have done. Look, it matches. At that point, that's when money can start being repaid, or the investment can end. It needs to be sustained for that entire period. But now let's think about these timelines. 2 to 4 years for the first step to be approved, another half a year to a year to get your green card through the embassy, then 2 years of residency in the United States. So we're looking for quite a number of years. Maybe it's 5, 6, 7, 8 years that the money needs to stay in this project, that cannot be returned to the investor. And I have unfortunately had to deal with some investors who were not aware of this, and they come to me saying, okay, it's time to remove my conditions. Okay, so now so where's the money? Oh, I got that back years ago. Oh no, you were not supposed to do that. So that's a challenge. So that's something for the investor. The money needs to be prepared to remain in the project long term. But because of that, immigration has allowed for this redeployment of funds. Now, what I would rather them do is just fix the processing times and get them back down to about a year like they used to be. And if you talk to some attorneys who've been doing this for even longer than I have, they remember the days where it would take 4 to 6 months, and sometimes even less. But right now, an investor would need to be prepared for that long-term investment, that it's in the project for a long time. Now, if it's something that they're doing themselves, this project is their baby. The money being used and reused is probably something they may consider anyway. They may plan for this, or maybe they do have that next project they're ready to move it into, but it's something they need to consider. They can't cash out of this investment until they apply to remove their conditions, which is after 2 years of holding the green card, which comes anywhere between 2 and 5 years after filing. It's a long game for sure. But hey, the result is permanent residency, and it's permanent forever for them and their families. And then if they have kids here, those kids are citizens. It's a perpetuity benefit that goes on forever and ever. So you're trading off time and expense for a green card, which is so valuable to so many people.
Okay, so I think from these last words, I think that the best advice I can give. I'm not an attorney. If someone asking me, well, Salvatore, I want to invest in, probably one of the best things that I should say is, Mr. Mrs., if you want to invest in the United States to obtain the green card, you have to be committed at least 5 to 6 years.
Yeah, you need to be prepared for a long-term investment for sure.
And here comes the other thing, in holding the 10 jobs.
Well, right. Now the jobs need to be created once, it's because those 3-4 years of waiting for the first step to be approved, those jobs could have been created in year 1.
Correct.
And that then we are able to argue, those jobs were created then, maybe things changed, but you have to show that, especially with a regional center investment, did you spend the money in the right categories
Right.
that created the jobs? If things change down the road, well, then we deal with that. But we have to create those jobs. There are, again, so they can do this themselves without a regional center. They can have their own license or affiliate with one for their own project. If they want to invest in someone else's development, that's something they can do as well. There are lots of EB5 projects out there. There's a whole marketplace for EB5 investments through regional centers that already exist. There's some that we work with who are on their 70th offering, 80th offering. They've been doing this for 15 years, where they're just doing offering after offering, building hotels and amusement parks and assisted living facilities and multifamily housing and all sorts of things. And they're out there. So if this investor they don't necessarily want to do their own project, or maybe they just want to do that down the road. They're just looking for immigration by investment. There are less directly involved investments out there where a lot of it is going to be managed for them. And they're more acting as just an investor and not an active manager in the process.
Oh, that's a nugget of gold you just said there, because it is a long-term commitment for you to manage to be on top of that. It is completely
right. Because what if you want to sell it off after year 5? You want to sell it and you can't, because then what do you do? Well, you can, but then you can't move the money. You have to keep the money somewhere else. You can't take it back. And then is that creating a problem where, well, the project is over. Is it really sustained because we had to sell it off? Maybe you have to make an agreement with the buyer to keep the money. Like that can create some problems.
Yeah.
But if you go through a purpose-built EB5 system, and again, we've worked with a ton of them. We can make introductions. We know some of the major players. Some of them have been approved for expedited processing because their projects are serving some major importance in their communities. They're rare, but there's a couple of them out there where they're able to get some type of faster processing, where maybe that first step is coming back in anywhere from 3 to 12 months versus 2 to 3 years. It's rare. There's a couple of them out there, and they've been around for a while, so the slots are slim, but more are attempting to do that expedited processing, because who's waiting 3-5 years for this? It's crazy.
I cannot be more excited about the information you just shared throughout the whole conversation, because that's so important to speak to the people that carry the knowledge, you, counselor. Okay, so to close, 2 last things. What advice would you give, something throughout your years of experience, things that people do that they hurt themselves, or things they can do themselves to help themselves?
Sure.
What comes to mind, for you, counselor?
As soon as someone starts thinking that I'm ready to relocate, I'm ready for that long-term move, I'm sick of the back and forth, even though I have my vacation home and I love it, and I love going to the beaches and to the theme parks, I love it. I'm ready. As soon as you're thinking about what I want to do long-term, that's when you have to talk to an immigration attorney, because the decisions you make, even at that very beginning process, and even maybe decisions they might have already made, could have immigration consequences down the road. It could affect how we plan for things. Especially if they've already moved money around. We have to make sure we trace money if they're doing an investment process. And if it went the wrong way, we may not be able to use it. So maybe we have to use something else. These decisions have consequences down the road. I don't mean to use consequences as a negative thing. It's just cause and effect. Yeah. There's just something that we have to consider. So as soon as they think, you know what, I may want to relocate here for long term or permanently, that's when you should call an immigration attorney, because then you can start planning. And that happens down the road. If you're running a business through something like an E2 or an L1 visa, or if you're doing an EB5, like we talked about, the money needs to be sustained. Those business decisions you're making down the road could affect your status. It could affect the next step. It could affect your ability to do another step, to go from temporary to permanent. So maintaining that collaboration and that communication with your attorney after getting something approved is going to be important. Because what if you do something, it seems fine from a business standpoint, but then you come to me saying, well, I'm ready to change to a green card. Sorry, I can't do that for you because of something you did a year ago that made 100% business sense. It was fully legal, fully lawful in terms of business. It just doesn't jive with what immigration requires, because those two things often have conflicts. So it's creating that relationship. that long-term relationship with an attorney to start it early and keep it going throughout the entire process, even after approval, so that whatever the next step can be done safely and easily.
Okay, that was awesome. Yeah, people need to know what are their goals and set it up. Okay, if I want to have a goal to immigrate to the United States, what am I doing today that might affect that on a positive way or a negative way?
Yeah.
So
that butterfly effect is real. It can happen.
Yeah. So that's why contacting you, your law firm, will be the best step. Now, talking about that, how do we get to contact you, Counselor Picataggio?
Sure. My email address is sal@colomboherd.com. Our website is colomboherdlaw.com. You can visit us there and do intake that way. Or you can call us 407-478-1111. I think all my contact information might be displayed at the bottom of my screen,
Yes.
if it's visible all the way there, so you can contact us through me directly or through our website, colomboherdlaw.com. You can also find us on YouTube. We have a lot of content on YouTube. A lot of it is also in Spanish through Mr. Colombo. He's provided a lot of information on a lot of the things I've talked about, but also you'll see me on there. You'll see Mr. Hurd on there talking about E2s. You'll see some of our Portuguese speaking attorneys talking about these processes as well. So our YouTube content is very valuable as well. A lot of the same stuff we talked about today, but at a glance format, you can reference that and hopefully answer some of the questions that will help your clients make a decision on what they may want to do, or just at least maybe what they want to ask questions about. Sometimes you don't know what you don't know. Mm-hmm. And that, learning a little bit more, and hopefully this helps in some of our other videos where they can learn more information and plan, and they can make that plan so that they have the long-term plan, all the steps laid out in front of them. And then we get to do our magic to gather documents and make some legal arguments for them.
Yes. Excellent, Counselor. I want to thank you, your law firm as well, for this precious time. And also, I enjoyed you're very passionate what you do. It comes through, and that motivates people to take the next step with the right.
I've been told I have the energy of like a golden retriever who got a wish to be a real person for a day.
That's a good one. So super thank you from us at the Cavalieri Group, and thank you very much. And we'll be in contact pretty soon for other interviews with the related subject of immigration. Okay.
Thank you so much for having me. Really appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Make it a great day.